broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us to this webinar. We are going to present today on the version 11.5 release that we released a couple weeks ago. Hopefully most of you have already updated, and we're just going to talk about like the new stuff that is come out in this release so that you can start trying it out. Okay, today I have with me Mike Cook, our senior applications engineer, and Alex Nicolas. He's one of our software developers doing some of the demonstrations. We'll also have Marty, our senior developer, answering questions on the chat. So if you have any questions while we're going through, just go ahead and type it in. He's going to answer them as well. And I'm going to just introduce all of the topics. So you might know me already. My name is Jennifer Triana. I am the processing software manager for TopoDOT. And I also sometimes answer your training questions or your support tickets. So you probably are familiar with me if anything. All right, so we're going to do a short presentation and then we'll run up with a demonstration and questions and answers at the end. Let's go ahead and get started. All right.
For everything that is simple, we have to go through and create it.
Let's see. Is it going? Come on. There you go. So what's new in TopoDOT v 11.5? We're going to talk about some of the new stuff that came out on this release, but I wanted to let you know that most of this stuff that all of the stuff that we're presenting today is only available on the 64-bit version of TopoDOT, meaning for Connect edition. And there were some updates done to the 32-bit version, and you can see the list of changes in the wiki's page log change log page. But since MicroStation V8i is a 32-bit application, it's too limited to create some of the tools that we're gonna show you. So we suggest upgrading to the Connect edition if possible. And if you are updating, just make sure that you are in the MicroStation or similar update 8 or newer, and they're already in version 12 or update 12 if you must know. But if you get an error when you're updating, you probably need to update MicroStation as well. All right. The first tool that we're going to showcase is the volume calculation tool. It's for this release, it's called actually the stockpile, so you'll find it as the stockpile tool. But if you browse for it, you can look it up through the volume calculation as well. In future releases, it's going to be renamed as volume calculation. And this tool will allow you to create a cut and fill report and generate a surface of the data by creating a boundary around the area that you want to calculate the volume for. There is no need to clean up the data or create a surface prior to the calculation. This is some of the methods that we had to do before to try to get a volume calculation. But with this new tool, you don't have to do any of that. The tool will take care of you. And it can be used in many applications. So initially we created it for stockpiles, but we've found a lot more applications that this tool can be deployed in. Like if you want to do cut and fill information on rail ballast or cliff or ditch areas around the road. There are many applications. So anywhere where you need a cut and fill application, you can deploy this tool. Another tool that we're going to be talking about is the flat asset identification tool. This tool is going to allow you to extract pin markings that are identifiable by an intensity range. And this just takes 2 to 3 clicks to create the asset. And as you create your library, you can add all your assets, and the tool will recognize the asset based on where you click. So you don't have to actually search for the asset prior to placing it. So this is going to be very easy, and it's going to improve your extraction speed and efficiency, because you don't have to actually identify the cell. You can just select the arrow or whatever you're trying to extract with 2-3 clicks, and the tool will recognize it. So you can use it on pin markings like arrows or speed signs or text pin markings. And if you have any other application where you can isolate the intensity, you can probably deploy this tool for labeling assets. So for example, manholes or utility covers, things like that, that you can identify on the intensity. Another function that we'll showcase here is this dynamic element information. And so with this function, you can double click on any element, linear elements, to see the start and end direction of that element. And this is useful for a lot of things, like identifying the direction of an element. So if, for example, you're extracting something along a path, you can see in which direction it's going to go. And you can potentially find any anomalies. So this is sort of easy to see here that there is a dip on this line because it's showing you how it's sloping up and down. So this will be helpful to identify any issues on a line from a top view display. There are other changes on this update, especially for the template tools, but we want to dedicate a little bit more time to this tool, so we created another webinar for this topic specifically, and it's going to happen next Wednesday. So I will follow up with an email for an invitation email, and it'll also be on the splash screen of TopoDOT if you want to register for this webinar. If you got the release email, the link for these templates webinar is also there. So this is happening next Wednesday at the same time. All right, so a couple things to remember. You need to install the latest version, and sometimes it's not clear that you can do it directly from TopoDOT. So I'll show you where, but you can also download the link from the university. Okay, so if you want to do it directly from the university, you just go to the new website, the new university, and it's on the downloads button. And these, make sure that if you're accessing the university, a couple of things that I want to remind everyone is, one, we migrated to a new website. So if you haven't registered, or if your registration information is older than April 15 of this year, then you need to create a new account and link your license to that account. So you still need to go to TopoDOT and click on register for university to link your license to the online account to access all the information that we have there for you. Okay. And we also have an option here on the TopoDOT directly. So if you go to settings, check for updates, that'll be the easiest way to update TopoDOT. So if you click on check for updates, it will let you know if you're on the latest version or if you need an update. And if you do, you can download it right away. All right. Having introduced all of the subjects that we're going to talk about today, we're going to go ahead and see it in action. So I'm going to allow, who's going to do the presentation, guys? Alex or Mike for the volume?
It's going to be me.
Okay, so we're gonna allow Mike.
Should be.
Yeah.
There you go. So I'm gonna make you presenter. Go ahead and show your screen when you're ready. Okay, you're presenting, Mike.
Yep. How about now? My screen? All right. So just like Jen said, the volume tool is going to do a couple of things, mainly, obviously, measuring the volume. Can you guys hear me? Okay, just making sure. And so I'm going to be using the first iteration of this tool. She had mentioned a few features with the beta portion of this, and the beta will carry the ability to do multiple files at once. We're going to have reporting capabilities, and then there's going to be kind of a mesh smoothing for visualization. So what we're going to look at here is what's currently available for everybody else to kind of get their hands on this tool. So let's take a look at the data here. And what we'll need first is basically an outline of the stockpile. I'll show you how to get this in a second, but with this outline draped on the ground, we're basically just going to select that line and click calculate volume. It's going to run through, give us the mesh above. Okay, you have the option to do a ground mesh. That's basically the mesh underneath to close the void. This is our main mesh above. You can also plot the points. This is very similar to just dropping a grid of points on this surface. Classified data, that's also an option too. We won't necessarily run this right now, but it could be utilized for classifying the data above and below the ground mesh with a specific tolerance there. All right, so here's our final values. It's going to carry whatever you have unit-wise from your design file. So if I switch this to survey feet, I can get this kicked out into feet. Let's talk about this this boundary here. And if you can see your pile, you could just quickly outline it. If you can't really tell where the edges are, you can always switch to like a colored contours. It kind of helps things pop a little bit. And then from there, you can place either a smart line or a B-spline. But we'll just kind of quickly dart through here. And you can be as careful as you want. I'm just kind of rushing this a little bit. You got the smart B-spline option. So if you want to really smooth this out, so I'm going to redraw this every, let's do ½ meter. So it's nice and smooth. And then we're going to have to drape this. So I'm going to drape this down to the ground. And in this case, we'll do 0 interval, and we'll make sure that our sample size is nice and large enough. Should have worked in feet here. So we'll have our sample size there, 0 offset, and we'll force these to vertices. So I'll just drape it at the vertices. And let's go ahead and just auto accept those results. Okay. But the idea is this line is now down at the ground for us to use. Okay, so we'll select that line and then simply run the tool. Maybe some more details on this cut and fill. So you have anything above our ground mesh running. So all these handles here are spanning across to the other side on this perimeter line that I've just set. So that's basically our reference plane. So anything above that is going to be our cut, and then anything below it's going to be our fill. Okay. Now, we're going to be limited to doing this one pile at a time, so if I do happen to select 2 piles and try to run the tool, we'll just get a message asking us to work with a single boundary for now, but in the future that will change. All right, so this was one example. Let me go ahead and look at some other examples real quick so I don't eat up too much time. And for that, we'll do rail ballast. All right, in this example, we basically have a simple straightaway of a rail here. We have a ballast, and the idea is the same thing. We want to get our reference line, or the line that we drape, down at the base of the ballast, so we can measure the volume here. And in this case, we just have it simply going from like an inner ditch line, and we kind of carried this elevation over. There's going to be a variety of ways to do this. You can always use like the center line. You could do a move parallel to get these 2 lines here. Okay, we can offset those the same distance. You can close the ends for that line. You could do a final draping, or you could just simply trace it out like I did with the stockpile. Again, we just select our shape, open up the tool, run the tool. And we'll get our final surface here, our text. In this case, I'm working in feet, so you guys can see the option on that too. The last example that we have is going to be a cliff face example. And let's say we're expanding a road and we have to remove some earth here. And once I get the point cloud up, you guys will be able to get a nice visual of this. Same concept though, we need to set up our reference plane. Basically what our ground mesh will be, and then we're calculating the upper mesh and then comparing those two to get a final volume. And let me just kind of quickly explain how you would get this bottom one. So we don't want to technically drape this backside. Okay, we're just using this as our reference plane to calculate the volume off of the top of this data, or the rock face. And once we get the mesh up there, it's going to utilize this bottom mesh to get that volume. So in this case, I've maybe have draped the front edge of this. Okay, and then we did a move parallel for this back end piece, and then again we just connected the sides here. It could be a line string, and most likely a shape as well, so it doesn't appear like it has to be a shape. So select our element here, we'll run the tool. And you'll see our final mesh on that surface. Keep in mind that if you do have any overhang, this is more or less for like kind of a quick and dirty volume calculation here. But if you're looking for really accurate overhang values, there are other approaches to getting the volume, which we can obviously help you out with that on that. If anybody's used a previous way of measuring volumes, they might already have an idea of how to approach this, but I'm not going to cover that. But those are going to be the 3 examples that I'm going to show. The last thing that I will possibly be showing for this is just the element properties. So we're going to eventually become a little bit more user interactive. So if we click on a line, you can see we get these little graphics here. All right, so this, in this case, is just giving the user a visual of, okay, here's the start of the line, this is the direction of the line, and if there's any error in between, we'll actually get a colorized arrow to indicate maybe a slope change or something like that. Let me take a look at that last DGN here. I think, oop, not that one. This one's going to be perfect. I think it was one of these lines. Here we go. Okay, so we saw the same thing just a second ago, but most of the arrows were blue. Well, these arrows are going to be colorized because it's changing in slope. So this is just kind of a precursor to some other things that we're doing, like you know, renumbering data tiles and things like that. So if you have those data blocks that everyone's familiar with, so we'll do generate tiles along. We'll do like a 10 by 10. And if you are going to edit like the numbering system on these, you might have crossroads and other things like that. The idea would be you would get, you know, little graphics like this. So this is kind of where we're going with these visual graphics to kind of help the user out with certain elements. And I think we had talked about things like identifying duplicate points, identifying maybe duplicate lines, but we're open for feedback, and maybe Mauri would have some input that he'd like to say on what.
Yeah, what you can do too is if you delete one of those, like cancel out that renumbering tool, and delete one of the tiles on the end. Not the first one, do that one, yeah, and then run that renumbering thing. You'll notice here it's actually telling you that there's a gap in the numbering there. So if you fix your numbering at that point and change that 3 to a 2, 3, and put 2. You'll see it fixes that gap, and then it renumbered all the other ones accordingly as well.
Yeah, so obviously the webinar wasn't exactly about data tiling, but you can see where this is going to apply. I don't know, we'll have to expand upon this. If anybody has like, you know, interesting scenarios that you know, they think would help, please, you know, let us know, and you know, we'll utilize this elsewhere. Jen, if you'd like to take over at this point and start covering the flat assets, I'll let you. Or do you want to answer questions about this volume?
So I was looking at the questions. So somebody asked, are all the calculations can be done with MicroStation Connect, or do we need other software like OpenRoads? So Mauri replied, and he says all you need is MicroStation Connect to calculate the volumes. So you don't really need another design tools like OpenRoads.
And maybe any of the Connect platforms will most likely be acceptable. Probably even PowerDrive. Alex, if you would have.
And then there was another question here from Max. Are you creating mesh from using cloud points, or you created point grid options and then created the mesh? And Mauri did reply that the tool will automatically create the mesh from point cloud, so you don't have to previously create any meshes or do a grid of points or anything like that. The tool will actually create the mesh directly from the data. Here's another question from Jason Larson. I assume the arrows are looking at the change in slope. Is there a way to specify a range to flag? Mauri, do you want to answer that question?
Right now, there's no way to specify a range for that. It's actually looking for like anomalies in the slope. I mean, you can have that change of slope going, but if all of a sudden it jumps like a lot more than anything else in your line, that's when it starts flagging it either yellow or red. And then, so I mean, in the future, I can possibly look at adding an option to specify how sensitive that is, but for now, it's hard coded.
Got it. Here's another question. Do we need to create contours or do we need other software? No, absolutely not. The contours that you're seeing there is a display mode of TopoDOT. So you just basically change your display mode from intensity or whatever you're looking into the color contours and specify the elevation difference in the contours. So this is just a display of the point cloud, not actually a contour lines from a surface. Can you use the original and update point cloud to get more accurate volume calculations? Basically, before and after.
Yeah, so for that tool, I don't remember if it's in the current release, but in the beta for sure, we have an option to where you can select a mesh to use as the ground. So if you have your before data, for example, and you make a mesh of, let's say, what the ground should be, then you can select that in the tool, and that's what it'll make its calculations off of on cloud.
Great. All right. Okay, I guess we can move on now to the other tool that we're highlighting here, the flat asset. So I'm going to go ahead and show my screen. Hold on a second. Okay. And show screen. You can see my screen now, right?
Yes.
Awesome.
Yep.
Perfect. Okay, so this flat asset tool is to basically create all of these painted markings that you see on the road in 3 quick steps. So I just wanted to show you first that I have all my paint stripes already created, and I definitely want to start with that to show the direction of where the road is going.
And we don't see your screen.
You don't see my screen?
No, just to see it in action.
Oh, sorry, my bad. There you go. There you go. Sorry. So again, I have all my paint stripes already created, and I'm gonna go ahead and show the data. And here are the assets that we're trying to extract, right? So you see them clearly there, standing out from the surrounding road. All right, so in order to deploy this tool, you need to have a cell library of the assets that you want to place. So these are just the symbols that you want to use to represent that asset. And in the extraction tool, we have the tool here called the flat asset identification. So in the flat asset identification, you can create categories for the assets that you're trying to extract, so that you can, so that the tool identifies, for example, all the arrows, and so you have just the arrows on that category, and you can make another category for all the other assets. That way, it's a lot faster and simpler to be able to locate that asset for you. Also, so for example here, I'm going to show you, first demonstrate how the tool works, and then we'll go through how to create one of these symbols or assets. So basically, if you can see it on the data, you just you have several methods of extraction, but let's go with the 3 points, which is the most accurate. As you can see, the asset that I'm displaying here is not exactly the one that I'm locating, but it is on the arrows category. So all I have to do is do 3 clicks here. Hold on. I'm going to go a little bit left. There you go. 3 clicks to show the asset, and it'll locate it based on the shape of the asset, right? It's also showing me how it's fitting it based on the data, but it is placing the symbol itself that we have on the cell library. Okay, so the symbol doesn't necessarily have to fit perfectly, but it is the representation for that particular asset. So it is very simple. There is another option here for the two arbitrary line. So we just place a line and it'll locate it as well. Okay, and also you have these guidelines. So this is useful for like if you have a lot of little arrows along a stop area or intersection, you can use a line to create all those arrows with one click. But I don't have an example here, so that is usually where you find that that option. Okay, so you saw how it works. It's pretty clear and simple. So I'm gonna go ahead and create a an arrow here for you to show you how it works. So I'm gonna go ahead and click on add or modify the assets that I've already created. And the first thing we do is add here on the bottom. And I'm gonna select a line next to it that shows me the direction in which it's traveling, or the direction of the road. And so I'm gonna click on that and get selected. Then we're gonna isolate the data around the arrow in this case. And I'm just going to use this eyedrop picker to isolate the data there. I don't know why oh, I know. Hold on a second. My intensity is under display, so I need to change these to hide. There you go. Perfect. Okay. So let me just maybe increase the points. So there you are. I can clearly see the arrow and it's isolated from the surrounding area. Then I'll ask to get the cluster, and it'll ask me to define a box around it. And that way it kind of identifies the edges of the cluster. I can make it even more better defined by moving this bar to the left. And if I want to remove any anomalies, I can just do this. Okay. So this is a good enough outline, or you can draw it if you prefer it and just click on get selected elements if that's the case. In step 2, I'm going to identify this cell that best describes this. So let's go with straight big, but as you can see it's flipped. So I'm gonna change the angle and then adjust the origin. That way I can establish how it's supposed to fit it based on the data around it. And that's it. And then we go to name it, and you can change the name to whatever you want and specify the category. So then we save it, and it's there now for us to extract. So now when we do the extraction, I can do locate, and it'll create it for me. So you can just go in another direction and place that same feature. Okay. So that is how it works. You can also attach attributes to this. So for example, you want to include any information that is specified on your feature type, like location, elevation, direction, whatever it is that you're trying to attach to that cell. You can do it directly on this tool as well. So here's another option, another tool. And that's it. So if you guys want to give this a try, it is available on this release. Any questions?
One more comment too. If the tool did pick the incorrect cell for whatever reason, you can press. It'll tell you on the bottom keys to basically alternate between the different fits.
Okay.
From best to worst.
You mean if I do this?
Yes, on the bottom, see it says press Shift or Control to scroll template. So if it did pick incorrectly, just push those buttons and it'll toggle between the different objects.
There you go. So it'll be down here. All right. Are there any questions about this tool? No? All right. Well, since you guys already saw the dynamic element function from Mike's presentation, I think that's all we want to cover on this webinar. Thank you for sticking with us for these 30 minutes. And we're going to have another webinar on Wednesday, so make sure that you sign up for this. Oh, yeah, we have a question. Can we attach cells by client? By client. I'm guessing this is client. So this is any cell library. You can just use a cell library from the DOT, something that you've previously created. It doesn't matter what cell you have. And as you can see, maybe I'll do the bicycle one, so that kind of shows that you don't necessarily have to have the same cell for the shape that you can see on the paint marking. So here, if example information, better, a little bit better for this bicycle. And okay, so let's see, do I have it there? I'm gonna click on locate. And let me see. Oh, I might not have it. I might not have it yet. So I'm sorry. It's on the main. There you go. So you can see that the shape of the shape of the cell might not necessarily fit. Well, in this case it does, but it doesn't necessarily fit the cell that you can place down. It might be completely different shape than when it's painted. It's just you're associating that cell with that particular paint marking. So it could be any cell library that you want. Okay. Okay, I don't see any other questions, so we're gonna end it right here. We're gonna post this webinar on the webinars page on our university page, and we'll see you next Wednesday for the webinar on the template extraction, best procedures and latest updates. Thank you for your time. Talk to you soon.